The Arizona sun hung low, golden and unforgiving as if it wanted to sear the earth itself. The wide open plains stretched for miles, dry and dusty, the grass brittle underfoot. Jack Callahan guided his horse along a narrow trail carved into the desert, the reins slack in his calloused hands. He'd spent the better part of the day repairing a collapsed fence, mending the water trough at the far edge of his ranch, and checking the cattle along the creek. Now, with the shadows stretching long across the plains, he hoped to reach home before night swallowed the world. His horse, a grizzled bay named Scout, snorted nervously, flicking its ears toward the horizon. Jack squinted against the bright light. That's when he saw it. A dark bundle, half hidden in the scrub, pressed against the slope of a small embankment. At first glance, he thought it might be a discarded coat, a roll of old blankets left by a passing wagon or drifter. But then the bundle moved. A soft groan drifted on the warm wind, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Jack halt in his tracks. He slid from Scout's back, his boots crunching against the dry earth, stirring up dust that clung to his jeans. The trail was quiet, too quiet except for the occasional whisper of wind and the distant call of a hawk circling above. Jack's hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his back, the wood worn smooth by years of use. "Hello?" he called, his voice low, careful not to startle whatever or whoever was under that bundle. The movement came again, more deliberate this time. Jack approached cautiously, scanning the horizon. There were no towns in sight, no wagons, no other riders. Whoever or whatever was here had been left alone, likely for hours, maybe longer. He knelt beside the bundle. His fingers brushed away the dirt, moving the coarse blanket just enough to reveal a face streaked with grime. A young woman's face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the dying sun, her dark hair matted and sticking to her forehead. Her lips were chapped, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. For a moment she stared at him as if she had forgotten what it was like to see another human face. "Please, don't leave me here," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a sigh, yet it carried a desperation that gripped Jack's chest. He looked down at her hands, shaking under the blanket. Bruises marred her wrists and forearms, raw lines that spoke of rough handling. Whoever had done this to her had done it with intent. Jack swallowed hard. He'd seen his fair share of hardship, cattle rustlers, outlaw gangs, saloon brawls that left men bleeding in the dust. But this was different. Fear radiated from her like heat from the sun. It was a palpable thing that made his stomach knot. He pulled his canteen and held it to her lips. The water ran cool, sweet relief to a throat burned dry by sun and panic. She drank greedily, choking a little, gasping, shivering as the cold liquid eased her suffering. Her fingers clutched the metal cup as though it were a lifeline. "Who did this to you?" Jack asked softly, careful to not spook her. She shook her head, her eyes wide, refusing to answer. She looked around, her gaze darting to every shadow as though unseen hunters lurked just beyond the firelight of day. Jack studied the area. The trail behind her was scorched by the heat, nothing more than cracked earth and the faint tracks of hooves and boots. No footprints led away from the spot. Whoever had left her had done so with haste and cruelty. Jack realized that this woman had been abandoned intentionally, left to die. And if she was lucky, she'd last another hour. Jack's instincts kicked in. He couldn't leave her here. Not with the chill of night creeping in, not knowing what dangers the desert held after sunset. He had to act. He gently lifted the woman into his arms, careful of the bruises and the weakness radiating from her body. She was lighter than he expected, but every movement sent her shivering. Scout nickered softly as Jack climbed back onto the horse. He positioned her behind him, her arms around his waist, and began the slow ride toward his ranch. The sun sank further, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood red, casting the plains into a golden haze. Every shadow seemed to conceal some threat, every rustle of grass a potential danger. Jack kept one eye on the horizon, knowing that in the west trouble could appear faster than a rattlesnake strike. The woman's quiet sobs were barely audible, but they tugged at his heart. He couldn't stop thinking about her journey, the hours she must have spent crawling through the dust, hiding from pursuers, praying that someone, anyone, would find her. And now, somehow, she had found him. By the time the first stars began to prick the sky, Jack's ranch appeared in the distance. A modest collection of buildings, fenced pastures, and the familiar warmth of home beckoned. He felt a mix of relief and dread, relief that he could finally get her somewhere safe, and dread that the moment he stopped, Someone might be waiting. Jack Callahan, seasoned rancher and former soldier, understood one thing with crystal clarity. Someone wanted this woman dead. Whoever it was, they were patient, cruel, and determined, and he had just placed himself squarely in the path of their wrath. As he guided Scout through the final stretch, the woman leaned against him, silent but trembling. Her small, shallow breaths and the faint pulse of fear vibrating through her body were all he had to measure her terror. Jack's jaw tightened. The West was full of violence, injustice, and greed, but sometimes it was also about standing between the helpless and the merciless. He had no idea what the coming night would bring, no certainty of survival. But he knew one thing. She was alive now because he had chosen to act. And in the lawless expanse of the Wild West, that choice could very well cost him everything. The night had fallen fully now, blanketing the Arizona plains in a deep, velvety darkness. The stars shone cold and distant above, scattered across the sky like pinpricks of silver in the black void. A thin wind rustled dry grass, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dust, whispering through the canyons and ridges beyond the ranch. Inside the small wooden cabin, the fire Jack had built crackled softly, throwing flickering shadows on the walls, the floorboards, and the figure huddled in the corner. She sat there, wrapped in the blanket he had draped over her shoulders, shaking violently. Her hands clutched the fabric, holding it as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to life. The firelight glinted off the tears on her dirt-streaked face, giving them a fleeting brilliance that vanished almost instantly. She didn't speak for a long moment, only breathing in shallow, panicked gasps, as though each one might betray her to someone waiting outside in the dark. Finally, she spoke, and the words were barely audible. "Please, God, just kill me. Make it quick." Jack stiffened, the words lodging in his chest like a bullet. He had heard plenty of desperate pleas in his life, from men begging mercy in the heat of battle or rustlers cursing their own luck in the dust, but he had never heard a woman beg for death with such raw, trembling sincerity. His mind froze for a heartbeat, searching for a rational response, an explanation, a reason why she would say such a thing. "Now hold on a minute," he said carefully, lowering himself to sit across from her. "Who in God's name are you talking about? What's got you thinking death is better than life?" She looked up at him, eyes wide, glistening with a mixture of terror and resignation. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They'll come for me, and if they catch me, it will be worse. Death is mercy, please. Just make it quick before they find me." Jack's jaw tightened. The woman's voice trembled like dry leaves in the wind. Each word weighted with the kind of fear that was almost unbearable to witness. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, and studied her face. Even in the dim firelight, he could see the exhaustion, the terror, and the grim determination buried deep behind her pleading eyes. "I need you to tell me what's going on," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I can't help you if I don't know who's after you. You're safe here for now, but if you keep hiding things from me, it'll make things worse. I won't let them take you, not while I can do anything to stop it." She shook her head violently, pressing the blanket tighter around herself. "You don't understand," she whispered again, almost to herself. "You can't. You don't know what they do to women like me. You'll be dead too if you try to help." Jack's heart twisted. He had been alone in the West long enough to know that some fears were rational. Men like the ones she hinted at had no conscience. They did what they wanted, and they left destruction in their wake. But Jack wasn't just any man. He had survived war, outlaws, and the cruelty of men without mercy. Yet now, sitting in this small cabin, staring at a terrified woman who would rather die than be caught, he realized just how fragile hope could be. "You're not giving me much choice," he said softly. "I'm not going to kill you, but you're going to have to trust me or you're going to get yourself or me killed. Now tell me what's happening. Who's chasing you?" Her eyes darted toward the window, toward the shadows that danced beyond the firelight. She shivered violently, as if the mere thought of revealing the truth would summon the hunters to the cabin. I can't," she whispered. Her lips quivered. I ran from someone who wouldn't let me live. He wants me dead if I don't obey. He wants me for himself. If I live, I'll never be free. Please, you have to understand. Kill me before they catch me." Jack leaned back, rubbing his face with one hand, trying to think. His other hand rested on the butt of his revolver. Not that he intended to use it, at least not on her. He knew better than to assume that the gun alone could solve a problem like this. There were threats in the West that no bullet could stop. "You're exhausted," he said gently. You're hurt. But death isn't the only way. I've survived worse and I can survive this too, but only if you let me help you. I'm not going to hand you over to anyone, but I can't protect you if you keep asking me to kill you. She shook her head again, tears streaking her dirt-covered cheeks. You don't understand, she whispered again. You think I'm asking for death because I'm weak. But I'm not. I'm asking because life would be worse. Life would mean being hunted, chained, beaten. I've already felt it. And it will only get worse. I can't go back. I can't. Jack studied her carefully. He could see the truth in her eyes, the kind of terror that comes not from imagination, but from reality. Her body trembled under the blanket, her fingers curled like claws into the fabric. He realized that whatever had driven her to this point, it wasn't simply fear of men. It was fear of being erased, of losing herself entirely. Jack took a deep breath. You're safe for now. I can't let you die, not like this. If someone comes for you, they'll have to come through me. You understand? You have to believe that, even if you can't see it yet. For a moment, she said nothing, only staring at the floor, trembling so violently the blanket shook with her. The fire crackled, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The night outside quiet except for the whisper of wind through the dry grass. Finally, she lifted her head, eyes glistening with fear and something else. Hope. Tentative and fragile, but real. You would risk yourself for me? She asked softly. Jack's eyes hardened. You're alive because I chose to. If I didn't, you'd be dead already. And I don't hand people over to men like that, not ever. Her sobs turned into silent gasps as the reality of his words sank in. Jack could feel the weight of the night pressing against them both. The desert outside dark and endless, the prairie filled with unknown dangers. But for the first time since he had found her, the woman allowed herself to lean back against him, trusting him if only slightly. For the first time, Jack didn't know how long she would survive, or if the men hunting her were already closing in, riding hard under the moonlight. But he did know one thing: he couldn't turn back. And now she had no choice but to rely on him. In the silence that followed, the wind whispered through the cabin, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. Outside, the night waited, dark and watchful, while inside, two strangers sat facing a choice neither wanted to make, but both would have to survive. Her fear of life and his fear of losing someone innocent to the cruelty of the West. And Jack Callahan, rancher, soldier, and reluctant hero, knew that the coming hours would demand more courage than either of them had ever known. The cabin was silent except for the fire's occasional crackle and the whisper of the wind outside. Jack sat near Clara, studying her, his mind racing. She had pleaded for death, and yet she clung to life as if the very air in the cabin could keep her safe. Her trembling hands still gripped the blanket, and her wide eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of light, as though enemies could materialize from thin air. Jack's instincts told him that words alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to see the truth, to understand the full scope of what she had been running from. With careful hands, he reached for the corner of the blanket. I need to know what's going on, he said gently. I need to see who you really are, what they did to you. The woman's breath hitched. No, don't, she whispered, pulling the blanket tighter. Her voice carried a panicked tremor, but Jack held his ground, kneeling slowly in front of her. He could see the raw fear etched into her face, the kind of terror that came from long nights of abuse, running, hiding, and never knowing if the next moment would bring death. Clara, he said softly, using the name she had finally told him. I'm not going to hurt you. I need to know. You've already trusted me enough to let me find you. Now trust me to help you see this through. Her trembling fingers hesitated, and finally, with a soft, resigned sigh, she allowed him to pull the blanket away. Jack's breath caught, beneath the dirt and sweat. She wore a wedding dress, or what was left of one. The white silk, once flowing and pristine, was torn and caked with dust. The lace had been shredded, the fabric snagged on thorns and brush along the trail she had fled. Stains of dirt and dried blood mottled the gown, telling a story of struggle, desperation, and escape. But it wasn't the tattered gown that struck Jack hardest. It was the iron cuffs encircling her wrists. Short chains dangled from them, scarred into her skin with angry red marks that spoke of long, cruel hours. Whoever had put her there had treated her like property, not a person. Jack's heart clenched, and for a moment he had no words. The firelight reflected in her wide, terrified eyes as she whispered, Now you see. Now you know why I begged you. Why, I thought death would be mercy. He shook his head slowly, swallowing hard. I didn't know. I didn't imagine it could be this bad. He stood and circled her carefully, taking in the marks on her arms, the ragged state of the gown, the way she trembled at even the smallest sound. She flinched, pulling her hands closer to her chest. You don't understand. It's not just what they've done, she said, her voice breaking. It's what they'll do if I live. If I survive, it will only get worse. I can't go back to them. Jack took a deep breath. He had faced rustlers, outlaws, and gunmen in his life. He had seen men bleed in the dirt, women cry for help that never came. But the raw cruelty in this scene, this chained, broken bride, hit him in a way nothing else ever had. It was personal. He felt rage coil in his chest like a living thing. He knelt again in front of her, his voice soft but firm. Clara, you're safe now. No one's taking you back. Not me, not anyone while I'm here. I need you to understand that. You don't have to beg for death. I'm not going to let it happen. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now, streaking the dirt on her cheeks. You don't understand. He's powerful. His men, they'll track me. They'll find me no matter where I go. I ran through the desert, through thorns and rocks with these chains on my wrists. I thought if I begged someone, anyone, to end it maybe. She trailed off, sobbing. Jack placed a firm hand on her shoulder. I understand enough. I understand fear, pain, and danger, but I also understand right from wrong. And this is wrong. They can't own you. They can't take your life. You're not property, Clara. You're a person, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you. She clung to him, shaking with sobs, and Jack realized that his promise, fragile as it was the first safety she had known in days. The firelight danced across her bruised wrists, the torn silk, the pale face that had once been full of hope now scarred by fear. He stood, pacing slowly, considering the next steps. Rollins, the man she had fled, was notorious. He didn't take kindly to losing what he considered his, and now Jack had made himself a part of this dangerous game, standing between a terrified woman and one of the West's most feared outlaws. Jack's mind raced. He needed a plan, not just to protect her, but to restore some measure of dignity to a life that had been violently stripped away. He would have to clean her, feed her, give her rest, and then find a way to face whatever came next. But first, he needed her to feel safe enough to let him do that. Clara, he said again, softer this time, I need you to trust me. I know it's hard. I know it feels impossible. But I've got you now. No one's taking you back. Not tonight, not ever. You hear me? Her head lifted slightly, the first flicker of hope in her eyes. She nodded weakly, the chains on her wrists a cruel reminder of the nightmare she had escaped. I hear you, she whispered. Jack exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about standing against the cruelty that had haunted this woman's life. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous. Rollins' reach was long and his cruelty was legendary. But Jack had never been one to turn away from what was right, no matter the cost. For the first time in days, Clara allowed herself to lean back, letting the blanket fall slightly from her shoulders, revealing more of the torn gown, the bruised arms, and the woman she had once been before fear had consumed her. And for the first time, Jack felt a deep, burning determination rise within him, to protect her, to fight, and to ensure that the man who had caused such pain would never have that power again. Outside, the wind whispered through the prairie, carrying with it the promise of a long night, the rustle of unseen threats and the chill of uncertainty. Inside by the fire, a rancher and a broken bride faced a simple truth. Survival was not enough. To live, they would have to fight. And for Jack Callahan, that fight had already begun. The firelight flickered across the cabin walls, throwing long, wavering shadows that danced like restless spirits. Outside, the prairie stretched into darkness, silent except for the occasional whisper of wind through dry sagebrush and the distant call of a coyote. Inside, Jack Callahan sat across from Clara, who had slowly relaxed under the warmth of the blanket, though her body still shook with residual fear. She had been quiet for some time, staring at the floor, her fingers tracing the frayed edge of the tattered wedding dress. Jack, sensing that she was finally ready, waited patiently. He didn't press, knowing that forcing her to speak would break the fragile trust they were beginning to form. Finally, she raised her eyes to meet his. My name is Clara Sutton, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know where to start. Jack leaned forward slightly. Start wherever you can. I'm listening. Her hands trembled as she spoke, weaving through the story she had been running from. The nightmare that had haunted her for weeks. My father. He owed a man money, cards, cattle, debts that he couldn't pay. I thought it would stay in the family, that it wouldn't touch me. But Jeb Rollins, he's not a man who waits. He wanted to make me his wife. And my father, he agreed. Jack's stomach clenched. Jeb Rollins. The name alone carried weight, a shadow across the Arizona plains. Stories of him had drifted into every town, whispered by fearful barmaids and hard-bitten sheriffs alike. He wasn't just a man of violence. He was cunning, ruthless, and relentless. Anyone who crossed him rarely lived to tell the tale. I didn't want to marry him, Clara continued, tears welling in her eyes. I tried to resist, but my father, he made the choice for me. And the night of the wedding. Her voice faltered and she swallowed hard, gripping the blanket tighter. The drinking, the laughter. I waited until everyone was distracted, and then I ran. I ran as far as I could. I thought, maybe the desert could hide me. Maybe I could escape. Jack listened silently, feeling the weight of every word. He had been in danger himself countless times, facing rustlers, gunmen, even death in battle. But the terror in Clara's voice was unlike anything he had felt. It was fear not just of death, but of living under someone else's control, trapped in a life that was not her own. They caught me once, she whispered, her eyes wide and haunted. They chained me, like I was nothing but an animal. But I broke free. I ran again. I thought, maybe I could reach the plains, maybe someone would see me, help me. Her voice cracked. That's when I met you. Jack's hand went to his chin, his mind turning over the implications. Rollins's men would be relentless, and the outlaw himself would not forgive a slight. Anyone who had fled from him was a target, and anyone who helped them became a target too. You're not alone anymore, Jack said, his voice low but firm. I won't let them take you back. You're safe here for now, but you have to trust me. Clara's eyes, wide with fear and disbelief, flicked to his face. Safe? Do you know what he'll do if he catches me? Do you know what he'll do to anyone who interferes? Jack nodded slowly. I've heard enough, and I've survived enough to know that fear alone isn't enough to kill us. But courage keeps you alive longer than fear ever will. Her lips trembled and she looked down at her bruised wrists, the chains that had been broken but still left deep, angry marks. I can't go back, she whispered. Even if I survive this night, he'll find me. And if he does, I'll be lost forever. My life, my freedom. It belongs to him now. Jack shook his head, anger welling inside him. Your life doesn't belong to anyone but you. Not him, not your father, not anyone. And I'm not handing you over to that man. She looked at him, the firelight reflecting in her eyes like fragile glass. For the first time since he had found her, there was a glimmer of hope in that fear, a flicker of something she had not dared to feel in days. The possibility that someone might actually fight for her. The desert. It's vast, Jack continued, his mind turning over the logistics. If Rollins is smart, he'll send men after you. But he won't know exactly where we are. I know the trails, the hideouts, the places he can't see. We'll make it through the night, and then we'll plan our next move. You're not helpless, and you're not alone. Clara's lips quivered. I've been running for days. Nights, I thought I'd die before he caught me, and then you found me. Jack reached across and took her hand gently, feeling the residual heat and tension in her fingers. And now I'm not letting that happen. Not to you. Not tonight. Not ever. A silence settled over the cabin, broken only by the crackling fire and the wind whispering across the prairie. Outside, the world was still vast, empty, and dangerous, but inside, there was a fragile sense of safety, a brief pause in the relentless pursuit that had defined Clara's life for weeks. Jack's mind worked rapidly. Rollins would not give up. He would hunt her with everything he had, but Jack also knew that the terrain, his knowledge of the land and his determination could give them a chance. And sometimes in the harsh West, that chance was all that mattered. Clara squeezed his hand, trembling but resolute. I don't know how to thank you for not giving up on me, she whispered. Jack shook his head. You don't need to thank me. You just need to survive. That's enough. Outside, the night deepened, the wind shifting and carrying the faint scent of dust, sage, and danger. But inside the small cabin, for the first time in weeks, Clara allowed herself to believe that someone was on her side. Someone was willing to face whatever came next. And Jack Callahan, rancher and reluctant hero, knew that the night would demand every ounce of courage, every bit of skill, and every shred of determination he possessed. He would protect her, and he would face the outlaw who had stolen her life. 'Cause in the West, sometimes doing the right thing was the only fight worth fighting. The wind howled outside, rattling the wooden slats of the cabin like a warning from the desert itself. The stars above were pinpricks of cold light in the vast dark sky, indifferent to the struggles of men and women below. Jack Callahan sat on the edge of a creaking chair, staring into the fire, the embers painting his face in flickering shades of orange and red. Across the room, Clara rested on a cot, wrapped in the blanket that had become her shield, her torn gown barely visible under the flickering glow. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of burning wood. Jack's mind raced. He had spent the day weighing every possibility, calculating risks like a gambler counting cards in a smoke-filled saloon. There was a bounty on Clara, a small fortune to some desperate soul. Rollins' men were out there somewhere, tracking her scent through the desert. The law would not help. Rollins' influence stretched across counties, leaving death and fear in his wake. And Jack had to make a choice: turn her over and collect the money, escaping with his life and his ranch intact, or protect her and risk everything. The firelight cast long shadows across the cabin floor, and Jack felt the weight of the moral decision pressing down on him. He had never been one to choose the easy path. He had faced outlaws, storms, and isolation. He had seen men die for greed, for revenge, for nothing at all. But now the stakes were different. This wasn't about cattle or land or even survival. This was about a life, a young woman's life stolen by a man without conscience, and the choice to stand between her and certain destruction. He glanced at Clara. She slept fitfully, her face pale and streaked with grime, her body curled beneath the blanket like a fragile bird. Every mark on her wrists, every tear in her gown, told a story of suffering he could not ignore. He had seen enough in his years to know that there was a certain evil in the world, an evil that demanded action. And tonight he was the only one who could act. Jack stood pacing slowly across the cabin, boots creaking against the wooden floorboards. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking of the men who would come for her. Rollins was notorious for his cruelty, his patience, and his cunning. If Jack turned Clara over, the bounty would be tempting, enough to secure the ranch for a lifetime, to buy a new horse, a new barn, even a quiet life free from worry. But the thought of handing her over, of seeing those chains returned to her wrists, of watching her terror in the hands of that monster, made his stomach twist in revolt. "No," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "I can't do it. Not like that. Not to her." The door rattled suddenly, carried by the wind, and Jack froze. Every muscle in his body tensed, hand instinctively moving toward his revolver. Outside, the desert was quiet again, but the sound had been enough to remind him of the hunters waiting, the men of Rollins, relentless and cruel. They would come, and when they did, he would have to be ready. He knelt beside Clara's cot, brushing a strand of dirt-streaked hair from her face. "Clara," he whispered, "you don't have to worry about bounty hunters. You don't have to worry about Rollins. Not while I'm here. I made a promise when I found you, and I don't break promises." Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear mingling in her gaze. You won't hand me over?" she asked, her voice small, fragile. "No," Jack said firmly. "I won't. They'll have to come through me first. And if they do, I'll make sure you survive it." She let out a shaky breath, tears welling in her eyes. But why? Why risk yourself like that?" she whispered. Jack leaned back, staring into the fire, letting the flames illuminate the resolve in his face. "Because it's right. Because life isn't measured by money or safety or easy choices. Life is measured by what you do when it matters, and this matters." He paused, thinking of the endless desert, the dangers that awaited them beyond the cabin walls, and the outlaw who would stop at nothing to reclaim what he believed was his. "I've faced men like Rollins before," Jack continued, his voice low and steady. "And I survived. I've faced worse, and I know how to fight. You deserve a chance to live your own life. That's worth any risk." Clara's hand found his, trembling but seeking reassurance. Jack gripped it gently, feeling her fragile heartbeat against his own steady pulse. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. I thought I was done, that there was no one left who would care." Jack shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. You're alive. That's enough. And I'm not going to let anyone take that from you." Outside, the wind moaned, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush, dust, and the unknown. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Rollins' men were probably riding hard, their horses pounding the earth, their eyes fixed on the trail Clara had left behind. Jack knew that the night ahead would be long and dangerous. Every decision he made could mean life or death, for both of them. He walked to the window and peered out, eyes narrowing in the darkness. The desert seemed infinite, a black void with hidden threats lurking in every shadow. He thought of the ranch, the fences, the open plains, and the rugged hills beyond. Every path was a potential escape, but also a potential trap. Turning back to Clara, he knelt again beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make it through this. I'll get you to safety, and when we do, you'll be free to live your life without fear." Her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. You mean that?" she asked. Jack nodded slowly. "I mean it. And I'll prove it. I'll face whoever comes, fight whoever stands in our way. You'll survive because I chose to stand in that path. And that choice, that's the only one that matters now." The fire burned lower, casting long shadows across the cabin. Outside, the desert awaited, filled with danger and uncertainty. But inside, Jack had made his choice. He would protect Clara no matter the cost. And in the Wild West, where morality was often overshadowed by greed and violence, that choice was a rare and powerful thing. Jack Callahan, rancher, soldier, and reluctant hero, knew that the road ahead would be perilous, that every moment could bring death, and that every decision carried weight. But he also knew that some fights were worth risking everything. Protecting Clara Sutton, a woman abandoned, chained and terrorized, was one of them. As the night deepened, Jack settled near the fire, revolver at his side, eyes on the horizon, ready for whatever came next. He had made his choice. There would be no turning back. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the cabin, danger waited. But so did courage and resolve and the unyielding will to do what was right.